What's up, y'all? Hey, good evening. It's Mike and Wendy. Welcome to the Marriage Shop, which is what you are in right now.
Yes. So what?
No, go ahead.
We're glad you guys could join us. It's 2021, so Happy New Year. The last time we were here with you, it was 2020, closing out those final weeks of December. And we enjoyed sharing our family with you. And we were tremendously blessed by all of you that were able to join us on that Monday. So we are thankful for those of you that are joining us tonight. So a couple of people, so Lisa's back and Jasmine's back out there. So we're going to be looking for those comments. Kimberly Lahadney,
Hey.
So glad you're here
What's
for the
up?
first time. We're excited that you could join us in the Marriage Shop. So for those of you that are out there that are joining us for the first time, we're Mike and Wendy. This is the Marriage Shop. And on Monday nights at 7, we talk about marriage.
That's it. Yeah. But why? Well, why the Marriage Shop even? Well, because there's always work to do. That's why. So whether you are doing really well and swimming along in kind of one of those good periods, you know those times where it feels like, wow, you know what? Things are real good right now. I can't see how it can't be like this every day. And then tomorrow comes and it's like, oh yeah, I remember now. So it's for those great days, but also for those ones where it's a bit of a struggle. And we try to hit on things that are relevant and that are real, right? So we're glad you're here. So it's good to see y'all tonight. Mm-hmm. You ready?
Yep, I'm ready. Okay. So the last thing that we talked about when we brought our family in was around something that someone had suggested or recommended that we talk about. And that was Christina, one of our faves, recommended that we tackle the topic of, is marrying for love still a thing? Yeah. Because of something that had been circulating in her feeds and among her friends. And so we're thankful that she gave us that topic. Tonight, we're going to talk about a topic that was given to us by another good friend of ours, Anna. And so often we will come out and we'll say, hey guys, tell us what you want us to talk about. You give us some topics and then we try to make sure that we cover those topics. So tonight we're going to talk about what Anna has asked us to talk about. But before we do, I wanted to make sure I said hi to Desiree. So Desiree, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Desiree.
All right. So Mike, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, we're going to talk about grief actually. And so this one, I would imagine, as soon as you hear the word grief, it's like, oh boy, okay. Click, close that page. Not trying to kill the joy, just had the holidays, right? But this is one of those things you actually should probably share this with the people that you know. You should probably go ahead and bring them in because we want to talk about it. We don't come to you as the authority on this particular topic tonight or any night for that matter, frankly. But this is one of those things that couples tend to avoid. And sometimes you don't even really think about it. There's so much we always talk about. Discussing before you get married. Talk about the finances, talk about kids, talk about your goals and your vision and all that, expectations. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily talk about how to handle grief. And the interesting thing is that it's a guarantee that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah. It's going to happen.
Yep. Grief is universal. I mean, as long as you are living, at some point in your life, you will experience grief of some sort. And that's what we know is for sure. And it's a guarantee. Yeah. How that happens in your life is unknown. When it happens in your life is unknown. And when we're talking about grief, what often comes to mind is death of a loved one.
Yes.
Right. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me anyway. And while we're going to talk about that tonight, we also want to highlight that grief could also mean the loss of a job or an opportunity. It could be the end of a relationship and you're grieving that. It could also be the loss of a pet. I can tell you that every day that I am on social media and I'm looking at my different feeds, what I see coming up almost daily, and I'll probably say definitely daily, but multiple times a day, there are people who are asking for prayer, asking for support, or announcing that they've lost someone or a pet that means so much to them. Yeah. And so having that opportunity to post or, comment a set of praying hands or a heart or a hug is one way that we kind of support each other. But we want to go beyond posting an emoji.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And so I can't encourage you all enough. Think of somebody and share this with them. And so that we can kind of get into this conversation a bit. And particularly now, right? The holidays, and you've heard me say before, the holidays, there's a misconception that suicides are up around the holidays. It's actually not true. Generally, suicides are down. We'll see what this year shows us in terms of data and information. Generally speaking, those behaviors are down. But what is up, actually, is what you may consider the holiday blues, right? There are some people that are a little bit more sad during the holidays than they are during the other times of year. Well, why? Because, we're talking family time, we're talking connecting and all that. And if you've lost anyone, if you have any memories about them, about what the holidays were like with them, a lot of times that can result in a bit of some sadness for people, right? And this year has just been unlike any other. And so it's probably an appropriate time to talk about how you do that. That is, as a married couple, right? When you lose someone or lose something significant in your life, what does that look like? I mean, how many? Please, and if you've done this, put it in the chat. Did you talk about how you manage grief, how you handle grief before you got married? If anybody did, I would love for you to put that in there. right?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that one of the things that you talked about before you got married? So, Antoinette Brunson, we're
Hey,
glad that you can join us here in 2021 in the Marriage Shop. And Christina, you always make me smile. As long as I have you around, I will never, ever, ever, ever have to worry about being or having somebody to lift me up. So, thank you, girl, for that. We appreciate you.
keep it up, Christina's name.
Yeah, yeah. So the question is, you know, before you got married, if you're in a long-term committed relationship, before you got married, did you talk about grief or how you handle grief?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yep.
Kimberly Lahani says no, they
Mm-hmm.
didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Lisa, no, didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, yeah,
Hey, Jessica, thanks for joining us. Yep.
oh,
She says
hey,
no. Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, and we talked about a lot before we got married,
Yeah.
but not that.
Yeah. Well, we kind of did.
Well, I mean, it was forced upon us before we got married.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had talked about it because before we got married, my mother had passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about it in the context of my past experiences or you know, things that had occurred in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't necessarily talk about how we handle it or how we process it,
Mm-hmm.
but we talked about at least the death of a loved one.
Yeah, but so we did,
Mm-hmm.
but we, at least in the way I see it, there was something that got missed there,
Mm-hmm.
right? For me, even because we talked about your mom losing your mom, and it had been relatively recent at that time, and you know it was, and you talked about even like the rest of your family history. We wrote about that, right? You talked about the rest of your family history even, and I mean, from my perspective, it's like, wow, look how, I mean, you just seemed relative for what you described, you seem relatively normal. Right? It was like I expected something different. I would expect somebody to be carrying a whole lot of weight and just be right, but you weren't. It seems like, I don't know, you could easily look at you and miss it and think, you know what, wow, she's doing okay.
Yeah, and I think that's true for most people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Many of us don't just carry our grief on our sleeve, or you know, you could say that may be some resilience. I mean, I could credit a lot of things. I can definitely tell you that because of my faith,
Mm-hmm.
because of the support of my family, and because of the love that people showed me, you know, it was easier for me to navigate that early loss of my mom. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was how old was I? I was 23 years old when my
Mm-hmm.
mother passed away. And so that has a significant impact. But the thing that I want to say, and I know that other people who have experienced loss of a loved one will say, is that it stays with you.
Mm-hmm.
So while you experience different responses when things happen,
Yeah.
over time, it is something that will continually come up at times that you don't expect. New grief reminds you of old grief,
Mm-hmm.
and taps into those old feelings that you may have had. And then if you have unresolved grief,
Yeah.
then that can also come up again. So yeah, but that was before we got married. And then right before we got married, your grandfather passed away.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was he actually showed up. It's funny because I got promoted that year. It was like maybe January, February when I got promoted. And he was there, and did you see? Where'd you find those pictures? We have a, you found the pictures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I was just going through those, like, wow. I remember that like it was yesterday, and I remember even when they called me into the office to tell me that he had passed.
Yeah.
And in our family, we didn't do grief because, I mean, in our immediate, that area, nobody passed.
Right.
We didn't have to deal with death. It was all like at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
And so having to then deal with that at that moment, it was different. Yeah, and that was different. And I didn't even know how to reach out, how to get support.
Yeah.
At that time, I didn't know, what do you do? I didn't really know what to do.
Yeah. So, and I'm glad you share that, because that is critical, right? Until you experience grief of some sort, you may not know how you're going to respond. But that also means that you may not be able to inform the other person or the person that you're married to on what they need to do, how they can support you.
Right.
That and we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple more people have jumped in here with us while we've been talking. So Jessica says a little that they talked about it a little before they got married. I met him not too long after his mother passed away, and my aunt had just passed. So kind of similar to us. Antoinette Brunson said they did not. Gerald Wilson, thanks for joining us. He says, "Good evening, family. Glad to be able to join you guys tonight. Happy New Year. Same to
What's up?
you.
Happy New
Glad
Year.
you're here."
Yeah.
Prentice Smith, greetings and blessings to you and your lovely
What's
bride.
up, sir?
And then Lisa McNeil says, "That was true for us for a long time. It made dealing with grief really hard as adults."
Yeah. So, yep, it did. And so, we managed to get through it the way that we do. But it was something. And so, since you don't know what's going to come up for you,
Yeah.
it's coming up. Like when it's happening, it's happening. And so you don't even oftentimes really even, you don't have that insight to really understand how you are doing it, how you living, how it's coming off. So
Yeah.
I don't know. So you could probably tell me better how I dealt with it at the time than I could right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of. I mean, it was a long time ago. I mean, on the surface, it at least appeared that you were dealing and handling it well. I mean, your family is one that always has been tight knit and close, and you all have always supported each other and helped each other heal, and that certainly happened during that time as well. And so I think having had experienced death a little bit more often in my history when I met you than you had. I mean, you seem to handle it well, although it impacted you deeply. And I think what was admirable is that you allowed yourself to experience it. You weren't trying to be hard.
Yeah, no. Even at that point, in my mid-20s, I wasn't inclined to fake it or hide it. I mean, I think a lot of people do because, it's and there are a lot of things, right? Culture is a biggie in terms of how people handle death. And so in our culture, that is the American culture, Black men, right? There's a whole lot of be strong, right? Be strong, don't cry, etc. And so the one thing my dad did right, he did a lot of stuff right, but one thing he did right, he just kind of let me feel the way I felt and didn't try to define who I was by the way I felt. Right. And so that, I think that helped me to be able to go ahead and go through a process like that, like all of it.
Yeah.
And not try to put up a front. Everybody has to, there's moments when you have to get beyond. You got to do what you got to do in a moment. But there has to be a moment where you come back and deal with whatever it is you put down. And so I don't know. I've always tried to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, we could talk about those experiences because we've experienced that, but we've also experienced losing 3 pets.
Yep.
So we could talk about that too. And it's a completely different experience because, having people close to you, and I don't want to minimize death of loved ones and family members, because I think that hits us and grips us like nothing else. So if you're joining us for the first time tonight in the Marriage Shop, or you're just joining us, we're Mike and Wendy, and we're talking about navigating grief together as a couple. And that's whether you're married or in a long-term committed relationship, just doing it with someone else. What that looks like, expectations around it, how you support each other, and potentially we might get to some do's and don'ts. Marquita Styles, thank you for joining us. And I don't think we've seen your name before, so I think this is your first time, and we're glad that you're here. Kimberly shared with us, I feel like when you become a spouse or a mom, you can't, or there isn't room to grieve. It feels selfish, and it's hard to explain what someone means to you, to your spouse, if he has never met that person. Yeah. And that is that's true. It's so true. And it's key because in our case, as we shared with you, Mike did not have an opportunity to meet my mother, but before I met him. I mean, my mother passed away before I met him. Yes. And so you're exactly right. And the effort that's put into trying to maybe explain or share or describe what someone is like, is different when it's a parent, I think, than maybe a close cousin.
Yeah, it's different. But even whoever it is, they mean anything to you.
Yes.
If there's not, if you don't both know them, right? If you don't know, because we had a little bit of a we'll call it some conflict over one of Wendy's ex, his brother was killed unexpectedly, suddenly, right? And Wendy wanted to go, and she was considering going to the funeral, and I had no connection to that person. And so it was difficult for me to have like emotion around it. And because it was a brother of an ex, right, that added a little wrinkle that really made it hard for me to get beyond what I was feeling like. Well, why? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we should probably get to that on the do's and don'ts as well, because we don't get, even if you know everybody involved, you don't get to define the grief, what it should be, what it should look like, and all that.
Yeah.
You know?
So. Yeah. And again, we can't talk about this enough. When we talk about two people coming together, it's all of your histories, how you were brought up, how you developed, all of those things factor into how you now cope, grieve, adjust, expect as an adult. And so, you know, how my family responded to grief and when losing someone was completely different than your family. And then having experienced that multiple times, it doesn't hurt any less. It doesn't have less of an impact. It just means that we had more opportunities to experience it than you all had at that time. One thing that we know for sure, though, as we age, that the frequency with which you experience loss of family members and others increases.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does. Yeah. And so it can be such an uncomfortable experience, right? We've already established, a few of you have gone in talking about that. Most people don't.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that it's so uncomfortable, even after you experience it one time. Generally, the reflex isn't, okay, well, let's talk about this more, right? It's let's distance ourselves from this, and let's get beyond it. Let's get past it. Let's get, back to some sense of normal. And you never really quite talk about it still.
Yeah.
Right. But and who could blame you, right? Nobody wants to talk about that unless you're my dad, who he has been laying out the plan for us for a long time, right? When he's gone, it's crazy. Come on, Dad. Anyway, but it is important, though, if you can muster it, to talk about that, because I've been kind of checking out some of the comments, and people, they do it differently. Yeah, it looks different, and if you're both grieving at the same time, well, now it can get real tricky about what to do. How do you get past that?
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because another thing that we experienced early, we had experienced the death of the husband of a really close friend who was really close to you, that we both knew. And even in the ritual around grieving and a funeral, for example, is different. Culturally, is different.
Yes.
And so those expectations, whether or not people are reserved and almost stoic during a celebration of life, or whether you call it a celebration of life, is even culturally different. Whether it's that, or whether they are falling out, passing out, crying, screaming, and hollering, is different in that expression of grief at a funeral specifically. But we could talk about all that. What we really want to talk about is how you navigate what's happening between and with the two of you. And so while all those other things are true, what we want to talk about is, okay, well, because you come from two different places and because you're two different people, when you experience loss, it is an individual and personal thing. So the one thing that is true for all of us is that each of us grieves in our own unique way. Regardless of how long you've been married, or you've been together, or you've known someone, each of us independently grieves in a unique way.
And I want to deal with the comment around feeling like you can't grieve, right? When you become a mom or a spouse, or if you feel like you got to be, a father, or whatever it is, strong. It's important, because it oftentimes feels like I can't I don't have the right to, I don't have the time to, I don't have the space. Mm-hmm. That's what it feels like. The question is that the reality?
Yeah. Or it feels like you have to be strong for everyone else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Being strong for everyone else. How many of you feel like you have to be strong for everyone else? I bet you. Just say, you know what? If you feel like you have to be strong for everyone else, if that's been your thing at some point, mm-hmm. just say that's me. Yeah. Put that in the chat. I'll put it in there for myself as well, mm-hmm. right? Because you feel like and since I have to lift everyone else up, I can't break down. Mm-hmm. I can't have that moment where I just release. I can't feel, right? I have to kind of put it to the side.
Yeah. I mean, so many times, I mean, we could talk about as an adult, as a wife, as a mother, all of the mm-hmm. things I could talk about as a wife, as a mother, all of the things that we feel like we have to hold up and be. When my father passed away, which was a few years after we were married, mm-hmm. You did know my dad. Yes. And so it was a different experience. Our girls were young, and how that impacted me at that point was different than how the death of my mom impacted me, mm-hmm. because at that time I was single. I wasn't married, and it was just me, mm-hmm. And my cat. When my father passed away, I mean, I was now married, so I was a wife, I was a mom, and through all of that, I've been a sister. So my sister and I, it's just the two of us, have always supported each other. And so it was like, man, now we really have to heavily lean on each other because we're all we have. Yeah. And so the siblings can sometimes share in your grief in a way that a spouse cannot.
Yeah. That's true. And I'm glad that you all had each other, because I think over the years that's just made really a tremendous difference. There's ways that Wanda can be there and that y'all relate, mm-hmm. that I can't. And that's like, it's so important. And so I'm glad y'all have that. I think that's a beautiful thing to have. Yeah. Yeah. And so so everybody does it differently.
Yeah, everybody does it differently. Mm-hmm. So you guys have I see a whole lot of dialogue going back and forth, and I mm-hmm. think that you're taking care of each other. But I did want to get to a couple of comments. Can you scroll up? Yeah. There was one that I saw specifically, and I think it was from Jessica. Mm-hmm. Yep, keep going. Right there. Okay. So she said, "We grieve differently. A lot fell on me to do. His family didn't understand why I was so involved. He put on the strongman face, but I knew better." Mm-hmm. And so that's exactly what we were just talking about. So thank you for sharing that and being transparent about that. And then she says, when his pit bull died, it was hard for him. I didn't realize how much it weighed on him. And I mean, and it's interesting that you say that, because I can tell you that we've had people say, it seems like you care more about that dog or that cat than you did about so-and-so. And that happens. That's real.
Yeah. That's real. There's something really interesting about the relationship between a human and a dog, right? The reason people, and if you don't understand, hear me now, and I'm gonna help y'all out, right? Whoever doesn't understand, because if you get it, you get it. Yeah. If you don't get it, understand this. That dog, right? Think about how you come home every day, and that dog does not care where you've been, what you did, like before you left home. They don't care. It's a new moment every single time you come, right? They just want to be around you. They just want to love on you. They just, and I do say love, right? Because mammals have that capacity to connect and to bond. And that's why people bond with their dogs. And so when you lose that, find me a human that is as non-judgmental as a dog.
Yeah. Or that gets over past wrongs as quickly.
Thank you. Right? Yeah. You can be like, raw dog, and they're like cower back, and guess what they're doing? Right? 2 minutes. They're coming back for more. Right? So that's why, I mean, and I'm oversimplifying it, but that's in part the reason why dogs mean so much to people. Mm-hmm. Right?
Pets. Yeah. Pets.
I say dogs in particular because I would suggest, and I'm just speculating, right? If you have a kimono dragon or something, is it kimono dragon? Whatever. Yeah. I mean, you might miss it, but I guarantee you that dragon is not acting like that dog. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just different.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's it.
So, Rel, I'm glad you're here. We're always glad when you drop in. And she says, I'm strong when my hubby grieves, and he's strong for me when I grieve.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it flip flops.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. And that can be a thing. I think it's just like when one of us is sick.
Yeah.
I think that the other one just kind of steps up a little bit. But I want to talk about that specifically because it really comes back to expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the challenge here and the challenge for some couples is that they have an expectation that their spouse is going to step up
Mm-hmm.
or step in and take care of them when they have a loss. And that may not happen.
Yeah. They may have that expectation, or they may have that desire,
Mm-hmm.
even when they haven't necessarily, expressed the expectation.
Yes.
It's just like, this happens, is how I feel. And you should kind of get it, I think, is where some people
Mm-hmm.
find themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's just hard to get it sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially if someone hasn't experienced a whole lot of loss,
Mm-hmm.
or if they're not someone who is usually emotional or emotes or, expresses their emotion.
Right.
And so while we may have that desire or that expectation, when that is unmet, it can cause tension. And that's really, I think, I don't know if that was what was behind recommending that we talk about this topic,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that it can cause tension.
Yeah, it absolutely 100% can. In fact, what grief does, any kind of stress can do it, but
Mm-hmm.
grief does it in a this very insidious way, right? It exposes your cracks. So if you have some challenges already going in,
Mm-hmm.
if grief strikes, it just makes everything that much more difficult now.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to sort through the
Mm-hmm.
grief. You're trying to sort through whatever the issue was. And oftentimes it's just like, you know what? That issue is unimportant to me, right? It doesn't even matter right now because I'm going through something, right? And so it can be pretty easy for distance to come between a couple when there's grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can be damaging and long lasting. There are couples who divorce over mishandling each other's grief in a situation. Mm-hmm. So many of you know that my background is nursing. And for a number of years, I was an oncology nurse, a pediatric oncology nurse. And I can tell you that time and time again, we would witness how cancer in particular would just tear those families apart. Mm-hmm. Because number one, there is the fatigue from just handling and dealing with the emotional burden of the illness itself. But then there is where you're not grieving, you're not supporting, you're not doing whatever, or the blame that comes with that, mm-hmm. which is true in other circumstances. And so that's where I first became familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the stages of grief. Mm-hmm. And so Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is someone who wrote a book on death and dying, I think is the name of the book, back in 1969. And she came up with the original, or for the first time, talked about the 5 stages of grief. Since then, there are now 7 stages of grief, and they're all, if you can Google stages of grief, and you'll see, that it's been laid out. The thing about the stages of grief, because some people will say, well, you're in denial or you're angry or whatever, is that they don't necessarily go in order. Mm-hmm. Not everyone experiences every stage. And you can't tell me if I am experiencing prolonged grief.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to put that in there too, because I know some of you want to know our references and our resources. But watching how that grief or that death, ultimately a death, the burden that it puts on a relationship, mm-hmm. that if it is even strong relationships, I was going to say if it's not already strong, but mm-hmm. even strong relationships, the burden that puts on the relationship can totally tear it apart if the two people are not talking about not only their expectations, mm-hmm. but also their needs.
Yeah. And just the ability to say, like, I'm struggling right now. Because some of y'all won't say I'm sad or, I'm crushed.
Yeah.
But you can say you're struggling, maybe. right? But I think it's so important to be able to talk about what's going on because, people are constantly adapting. That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
We're constantly adapting. And so when you try to put on a happy face, you try to just, get beyond it or what have you. Well, the people around you, they're moving as you move. And so you may be totally stuck and faking, and everybody else is beginning to move to a different place. And then now you're becoming a little bit resentful, a little bit frustrated or whatever, because you've not kind of dealt with whatever you need to deal with. And there's nobody there to really effectively deal with that for you.
Yeah.
And so I think that it is really important for a married couple to be able to talk about what's going on. And people get caught up on, things like the stages of grief and wanting to tag and identify, hey, this is what's going on with you. All you really need to know is that they're grieving. That's really all you need to know, right? Because as Wendy said, it can be all over the place.
Yeah.
You don't have to define it. You know it's there. And so what that hopefully will do will help you to ease up on things like kind of forcing the issue. Like, come on, I'm going to get you better. Let's go party. Let's go drink. Let's go. Come on. I know what we can do. You got to, slow down, be patient, and just go at the pace.
Yeah.
Right. That your spouse needs to go at in order to get where they need to get to. There is no way around grieving. Right. There's just not. You gotta go through. And if you choose not to go through, well, there's consequences to that.
Yes.
But if you choose to take that journey, right, there's only one way. You got to go through it. And so that can take time. And so a lot of people talk about, grief counseling and things like that, and, or therapy. And that's a thing.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But I want to encourage you all, like, sadness in and of itself is not illness. Sadness in and of itself is not necessarily something that you have to treat. Sadness is something that sometimes you have to feel.
Yeah.
But when it becomes, and you kind of know, right, when there's a point in which things can get to a point where your life is just unmanageable, or you just cannot move.
Yeah.
And only you can determine when that right point is. Because for some people, maybe they need help immediately. Some people may not recognize it for months.
Yeah.
But it's important to recognize, like, when you hit this wall and you just can't get beyond it by yourself, maybe getting some help is the thing to do.
Yeah. And the help that you need may be beyond what your spouse can provide. And so, recognizing that earlier is better, because we can sometimes place some heavy expectations on that other person to show up in a way that they may not be equipped to show up, because they have not either developed that skill set, they don't have it, or you haven't communicated it in a way that they can then meet it in the time frame that you've laid out. Some of us want instant support, it's this happened, you should be here for me right now, and you should be here for me more than anyone else. What often helps in situations like that, yes, seek help, but it is also spreading around and accepting support from people other than your spouse.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I would encourage you to do. I thought it was good that you said being able to say that I'm struggling is one thing, but on the other side of number one, being able to say that you're struggling or you're depressed or you're sad, is to secondly, accept help and support and encouragement and love from people other than just your spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's another one. So, okay. Lots of comments. All right. So let me get to these comments, because we could go on and on. So this person, I think it's Ron Harvey, says, my wife's father passed away early on in our relationship. I asked her what was the best way for me to be there and support her during her time of grieving. That's exactly what we were just saying. We stay as close to each other as needed when needed, and we give each other some space when we need that as well, without the guilt trip. We do talk about it and express how we are feeling. She was there when some very significant people passed away in my life. She was very settled, but very present in the way that I needed her. Beautiful, beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think that really kind of illustrates a lot of what we have been saying, and in a way that it works for the two of you.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. Rel is replying to Anna. So I want to go to Anna's comments if we can. And thank you for joining us, Anna. You were the one that that recommended this for us, so we're glad that you did. And so she's saying, go up a little bit more. Yeah. Okay. Go now. Go down this way. Okay. She says, I agree. Or if they stay closed off and then all of a sudden they are showing signs of depression and then get upset because you were not more sympathetic. So that was in response.
No, that was in response to that.
This?
No, down right there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, no, that was in response to something else. But then this is another comment. So she says, any good books that you recommend? Because since my brother died, I feel fine most days, but then I get really sad and emotional other times. And thank you for sharing that. That was something that I also pointed out earlier, that we can be good for a period of time, but things may remind us or pull us back. One book that I would recommend is called Embraced by the Light. I can't remember who the author of that book is, but I'll find out for you. But Embraced by the Light was really helpful for me when navigating the grief of having dying patients, because that was something that, we're not immune to. And the more you experience that, the more of an impact that it has on you. But that book really kind of helped me really kind of navigate through those feelings and to experience them in a way that was healthy for me at the time. So hopefully that book would be helpful for you.
Yeah. And family members, that brings up, I think, an important point about family members in particular, because we live our life in these cycles, birthdays, holidays, vacations, summer times, et cetera, right? And so we develop all of these rituals and these habits with these people, and then they're gone, but the cycle continues. And so, I want to encourage you all to take your time, and because there's so many little things that you're going to live in life that remind you of people. Yeah. Songs on the radio, places that you pass, cars that you see, things people say. The list goes on and on. Yeah. And so those things will often hit you even when you least expect it. But that's okay. And in some ways, it's important to just continue to live out your life in the process, right? Yes. Because those cycles will continue to come. But as somebody mentioned, I forget who it was, but your response is things will change over time in terms of how you respond to when that reminder pops up. Yeah.
Justice Smith, thanks for joining us. Lisa McNeil had a comment. She says, up a little bit. She says, grief brought on by death creates a situation neither partner can fix. Yeah. People don't instinctively know how to handle a situation when they can't fix it for the other person. Oh, yeah. Great point, Lisa. And I think it's probably the third thing. So whenever I get started counting, I always get off. But that was another point that we wanted to make. Resist the urge to try to fix either the situation or your spouse or your partner. It is, some of us, that's the way that we cope. And so we go into overdrive when trying to support the other person, and in that desire to fix the situation can be overwhelming for them, and it can be frustrating. So thank you for sharing that. Timothy Jones, thank you for joining us. I sent you that personal invite. We've been watching your journey. And he says, what about people who have experienced so much loss, grief, and pain in their lives that they no longer grieve loss? Let me tell you, again, not that I'm the authority on this, but when I have been around people who had I don't want to call it compassion fatigue, but I think that was kind of, that's a little technical for the people. Yeah, it was. They were burnt out. There you go. I mean, they really kind of reached this point where they kind of lost their empathy, that they were desensitized. That's the word I'm looking for. They were desensitized to it. And in that situation, so much of being human and who we are and our capacity to love is tied to also our capacity to grieve. And so what I would say is I can defer to the psychologist on this one. I probably should. We got one of those. But it is important that when you recognize that you're not grieving losses, no matter how small that loss might be, that is an indicator for you that seeking out help or counseling or someone that can kind of recalibrate you a bit might be the thing to do. Well, okay. All right. So now, I mean, I'm done with my response. And that might be the thing. I don't know. But the thing is this: there's a
a little bit of a distinction in what you said, Timothy Jones. I don't know if y'all picked up on it. He said, what about people who have experienced so much loss and grief and pain in their lives that they no longer grieve loss?
Yes.
He didn't say that they no longer feel loss.
That's good.
They no longer grieve it. Because when he's talking about, people will build up this wall. Right? Now, why they build it up, it kind of depends. Some people build it because they were told, that's not how we do it here. We don't cry, we don't whatever. Yeah. And they build that wall. Or some people, they've experienced so much, they just don't want to experience the pain anymore. So they try to cut themselves off from that feeling. The problem is, wherever you built that wall, the same wall that keeps those feelings out keeps everything else out as well. And it kind of keeps you in, so to speak. Yeah. And so you'll find that the ability to feel emotion in general narrows way down, right? You don't laugh too hard. You don't cry too hard. You just kind of ride the middle.
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of people then, they're afraid. They get so used to holding that in, or to tossing it back on that shelf that they built, in that bunker they built, that they're afraid to feel what might happen if they let anything out. Because if you let that one little thing out, it feels like it's all coming out.
Yeah, like an avalanche.
Like an avalanche.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what do? Well, I'm a big believer in finding ways to chip away at that wall and to let it happen. Because once you let it happen and the mess is made, the mess is easily cleaned up. It's more difficult to clean up the mess that you make when you don't emote at all, when you don't feel, when you don't connect. That mess over the course of your life is much more difficult to clean up. And so a lot of times it can require a little bit of help to begin to chip away, because a lot of people, they're not trying anymore. They just don't go there.
Yeah. And so here's something to also consider, as you were saying that many of us have children, not all of us, but some of us have children, and we are informing their process. So whatever it is that we choose to express, or, how we handle grief, how we share our emotions, how we either take on everything and never let anybody see us sweat, all of those things are informing how they then believe that they should behave. And so we always have to be cognizant, whether it's your own children or nieces and nephews or other children or other people that you're around. It may not even be your children. It just could be other younger family members. They are taking in information. And so, when we're able to be ourselves, to be able to freely express ourselves, for men to be able to cry, for women to be able to be strong or cry, for us to just be able to be free to express whatever way we want to express, is so critical to living healthy lives.
Yeah. And yeah, it's so important, because like what Tim was describing, a lot of young people in particular will look at the people that they respect.
Yes.
No conversation whatsoever, but they'll look at how they respond to things, and they will then say, "Oh, well, this is how I'm supposed to do it." I mean, I've had adult people tell me, "Hey, I don't cry because I never saw my grandfather cry."
Yeah.
Yet I'm dying inside. Right? I don't tell anybody that because I never. Right? So there are oftentimes things that we project without saying a word. But human beings are so fascinating to me, right? Because emotion, I call emotion the place where people meet at the very same place at the very same time. How is it we all sit in a movie and at the end everybody's crying, or at a game everybody's hollering, or whatever? There's certain things that just flip a certain switch, and all of a sudden you are connected, right? And so that's why emotions are like really important in terms of connecting with other people. Another fascinating tip, because Jasmine,
yes,
who's that? Okay,
Jessica.
Oh, that was Jessica. Oh, Jessica said sense and movies.
Yeah,
sense in particular, because our sense of smell is plugged directly into your brain's emotional center. You can smell something after like 20 years, and boom, it's just like yesterday.
Yeah,
it takes you right back there. Smell is powerful, actually, which is why people send cologne or perfume scented letters and all. Back in the day when they used to. Did y'all know that back in the day they used to like spray smell good on letters and mail?
Still do,
right? And so there's something about smell that's like really special to the human experience.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people can remember smells from the kitchen when they were growing up and different things. It's the same thing. It really does tap into our memory centers. And so thank you for sharing that, Timothy, and even going on to explain that you can acknowledge it and accept it, but you just move on, if that makes sense. And it certainly does. I mean, some of us, it does get to the point where you recognize and you already know how to process through your feelings, and you may do that quickly. But thank you for sharing it, because I think that might help someone. Kimberly, thank you for looking up the book. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And Brian McNeil, I am sure it is Betty Eady. So thank you both for finding that resource and reference for us. It's a quick read. It's a short book, but I thought it was very helpful in helping us just have a different perspective on death and dying and the dying process. And so again, thank you guys for taking care of each other and commenting on comments and going back and forth. So we do want to get to some do's and don'ts if we can. Oh, and one more book. Another book is Men Don't Cry, Women Do, Transcending Gender Stereotypes in Grief. And that's 1999. Terry Martin and Doka, Doka. That's who wrote that book. Okay. Sorry.
There you go.
Yes.
Are you good?
So some do's and don'ts, or 7 things to know about grief, or do's and don'ts. What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. Not all 7, but I don't. But I think that let's see. What's an important one? Yeah, I don't know. Oh, here's one thing to consider, and that is faith. I think Kim Lahotny was mentioning people at different levels of maturity, and we're also at different levels of faith, right? And so faith is one thing, right? Until you lose something, then that really begins to test where how you feel. And some people can feel challenged because they're asking questions, why, right? Why did I lose my child?
Yes.
Right. And somebody else did. And that can be very difficult to reconcile. And so we have to give people time and space, right? And if the time is appropriate, maybe remind them of the thing that they know already to encourage them, right? But be very careful with that, to not try to faith somebody out of how they feel in a moment.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Right.
That's good. Say that again.
I said, be very careful to try not to faith somebody out of how they feel in a moment. Sometimes what you need to say is like nothing, right? Sometimes you just need to be there and not know what to say and be okay with that. But a lot of times people try to force you to feel a certain way, or to force you to move beyond, right? And hey, listen, the Spirit will work with you when it works with you, right? And so we don't get to dictate when that happens for people. We just need to be there. So.
Yeah. Well, one thing, I know we've shared like 3 or 4 things already, but one thing, and I think you said it, is to allow yourself to grieve and allow the space and the time to do it. I think that's important. And so allowing yourself to grieve and the space and time to do it goes back to who we believe we have to be for everyone else. And that whole, who is it that I have to be in order for everybody else to be able to get through it? Sometimes it is okay to be selfish in this. That if there is something that you need, if you are the person that is going through the grieving process, then it is okay for you to allow time for yourself to grieve. And I added in the space and the time to do it. So yes, that's one. Another one I think I said earlier was allowing other people other than your significant other or spouse to love on you and to support you and to help you and all of that. Because when you put it all on one person, it may be overwhelming or it might be too much.
And oftentimes,
that's a do and a don't.
Yeah, look at that. See what you did right there. Ping, ping. It's like you're a ninja at this. And so, and a lot of times, people are there and they say, "Hey, I want to help you. Is there anything I can do? Can I be there for you?" And we're like, "Nah, I'm good." Right? Allow people to be there for you, even if you don't really quite know what it is you need.
Yeah. I think that's good. And I think we've talked about Gottman before, and this whole idea of checking in. So doing daily check-ins. So you talk about not knowing what you need or whatever, that can change.
Absolutely.
And so it is important that when someone is grieving, that if you're not the person who is the person who is directly grieving and you are in support of. So if your spouse is grieving, let me just be more specific. Mm-hmm. If your spouse is grieving, checking in with them often is important. Not overwhelming them, not every few minutes, maybe right. If that's not what they need, but a daily check-in just to see if there's anything that they need, if there's anything else that you can do, if there's some other way that you can show up that will help them. Mm-hmm. So, yes.
Yeah.
Daily check-in.
Yeah, really important. I mean, and it sounds like kind of what Ron was describing almost, in that staying close enough to kind of feel what's happening, but not overwhelming, right? Yeah. And I feel like I should clarify when I say don't face somebody out of their grief, right?
Yeah.
If I'm really in a place, maybe I don't need to hear you say, well, the word says if you're gonna be blessed are those that mourn because they're gonna be comforted. And here I am, maybe not, or trying to justify what happened, right, by using. Everybody just slow down and just be there. All right. Another thing is to not judge. We talked a bit about dogs tonight, right? Yeah. That's an easy one to say. A lot of people will somehow judge how you mourn or how long you're supposed to mourn or whatever. Whatever the loss is, don't judge the process, right? And if you get snapped at a few times, it's okay. Just back up, provide a little bit more space. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But everybody goes through this process in a different way. And we often try to project and lay our process onto somebody else, and it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. That's good. Another thing is to take breaks from grieving. So what do I mean by that? Again, from the perspective of caring for grieving families, and then also having been a grieving family and then my own grief, it is this whole thought that if you are grieving, that you have to be in this complete solemn state with no joy, no laughter, no enjoyment, that you almost self-select for isolation and quiet. And it is okay to take some breaks in that, because that breaks might be what you need. So what do I mean? Don't beat yourself up if you see something funny on television or a child says something funny and you laugh. It is okay to laugh. It's normal. It's natural. When my mother passed away, 3 of my girlfriends actually took me out to a strip club.
I heard about that.
And so here's the thing. I mean, I welcomed that they were around me, that they loved me and they were supporting me. And what they wanted was they wanted it to be a distraction. They wanted me to be able to just kind of have a place where I didn't have to be anything or do anything and just kind of be distracted. And I love them for that. And so, again, that was an interesting diversion and distraction, but the 3 of y'all know who you are. I love you to this day for that. It was something that I didn't know that I needed, but I welcomed, and I would do it again. So I say that again, maybe not necessarily the strip club.
No, it's whatever, baby. It's cool.
Yeah. Right. But my whole point in that is it is okay to take a break. It's okay to not, hold a vigil every night during a time of grieving, or, and I want to be careful not to insult or criticize or anyone's grieving habits. That's not what we're trying to do. Grieve in your own way. But I also just want to be mindful to give permission on some other things. And that is allow yourself a little bit of space for a break from grieving.
No, it's important. I think because sometimes you can trigger kind of a better feeling and mood by just going and doing something. But what we discovered as a family is that after we lay somebody to rest, we gather and we just like clown and act a fool. And there's something that is really, really cool about that. And so that's what we do. And it is now, it's almost like the expectation, like, okay, we're gonna gather, maybe at my sister's house, and so that helps a lot, and it creates it's interesting. It takes something that's so heavy and creates an additional memory that brings a smile to your face. So we gotta go.
We gotta go?
Yeah.
Oh, it's time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, there's so many things that we want to share with you. So if you think someone would benefit from anything that we shared, make sure you tag them, drag them in here. There are tons of videos. This video will be posted not only on our Facebook page, but on our YouTube page. I know it got a little long-winded. It's a topic that we can talk about time and time again. I just want to make sure that we express to you that, especially during this time where many families are being impacted by COVID and many of you have lost loved ones, it is our prayer for your continued healing, that you all are grieving and supported in ways that are healthy and ways that will sustain you. And if there's anything that we can do to help better support you as you try to support each other, just let us know. Drop us a note, drop us a comment, send us a message, and we're happy to do that. But just know that our hearts go out to you, that we're praying for you continually, and we appreciate you so much for supporting us in the Marriage Shop.
Yeah, and no more of those deep last minute questions, Ron Harvey. I see what you're trying to do there, but the answer is yes, though. Like to be human is to live in this place where joy and grief occur at the same time, childbirth and a death in the family, same time, right?
Yes.
COVID, a lot of good things happened during COVID, a lot of tragic things, right? That's human, and so there's no guilt around being in both of those places at various times in close proximity, right?
Yeah.
But we're gonna pray for you, and we're gonna get you out of here. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Heavenly Father, we just come today just thanking you. Thank you for our time here today. Thanking you for life, health, and strength, and for the ability to share with friends. We just ask that you bless these people, God. If they have things that are going on that are heavy, we ask that you lighten their load. Help them to see, God, that there are so many ways that you can bring us comfort divinely through your Holy Spirit, and certainly through the other people that surround us every day, or maybe certain memories, pictures, whatever it may be, God. We just ask that you be with them and help them to navigate through the difficult times in life, and grow closer as married couples together as they go through together. You just ask you help us to have more understanding, more love, more joy, and more peace. So we thank you, God. We love you and we trust you with everything. We pray these and other blessings in your name. Amen. So, hey, I think that is all. We're going to see you all on next week, Monday
at 7.
At 7
on Facebook or YouTube. You can also catch small portions of our videos on Instagram, but Facebook and YouTube, you can catch the whole thing. We'll see you next week.
Bye, y'all.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's your boy JC. I'm in the mood. Love. Yeah. Lately I've been constantly thinking about you, babe. You drive me crazy. Yeah. And girl, I want this. Got me all up in my feelings. Over the feeling, yeah. I knew the first time I laid eyes on you that you would be here forever. I'm not being arrogant, and I still can't take my eyes off you. 'Cause you made me better, so much better. I'm in the mood to love you for a lifetime. I'm in the mood to love you for a lifetime, baby. I love your kindness, I love your confidence. Ooh, you're the finest. So glad you're mine, yeah. I don't wanna be with nobody else. Give me your love, that's all the wealth I need. Baby, you're priceless to me, yeah. To love you for a lifetime, I'm in the promise I'ma be around. I'ma always hold you down. Won't you come and hold me now? Won't you come and hold me now? I just got a new coupe. Yeah, I know I got a roof, but I always keep it down with you. Yeah, and I know they see, girl, you're my queen. Beauty speaks for itself, loud and clear. Yeah, so throw it in the air. It's the sweetest sound to follow my ear. And I want the world to know I'll love you forever. And that's a long time, babe. But I got time for you, baby. I'm in the mood. Ooh, for a lifetime. I'm in the mood to love you, yeah. For a lifetime, baby. Ooh, yeah. For a lifetime. Oh, for a lifetime. Yeah, yeah.